So what I want to do is, I want to talk about a question that I've been thinking about and probably wrestling with for, I don't know, the last 15 years or so. And, is there an answer to the question? I guess we'll kind of explore that, but this is it. Can digital art have the same emotional impact and historical significance as masterworks, painting, drawing, and sculpture? Are masterworks dead, or is something going to emerge? It's a tough question, especially with all the new stuff that's going on right now. Duncan was just talking about the democratization of artwork, and of course that kind of spreads everything out to where maybe we shouldn't even be talking about masterworks in some ways, because it's not PC. So everything should be on the same level, right? So I don't know. We'll get into that. Okay, so this is the answer. Here's your answer. Right? And so the thing is, and when I talk about masterworks, I have the Mona Lisa, got David here, and these are considered the masterworks. These are examples, right, of works that have withstood the test of time. Hundreds of years later, we're still talking about it. We're still considering it to be the top hit. We're still comparing things to it. It still elicits a lot of conversation. And there's something to them. There's something happening here with these works. It's a painting and a sculpture, really, right? But there's something that happened, and there's something that's happening, it's continuing to happen. Now, it's not to say that an artist can just decide, you know what, I'm going to make a masterwork. That's what I'm going to do. And so here I am setting about to do this, because that's a problem. This is a quote by Banksy, one of my favorite artists, perhaps arguably the most famous graffiti artist in the world. And it kind of sums it up. So you really, setting out to produce a masterwork is not something you should even necessarily aspire to do. You simply do your thing. And if it becomes a masterwork, well, it may even be long after you're dead that something might happen. I love the whole, the ironic life of, Van Gogh with the ear and all of that. He lived and died not knowing that he was a master. Maybe he knew it inside, I don't know, but he didn't sell anything, right? He sold something to his brother. He didn't know his whole life. He thought he was garbage, or at least the world did. And now we consider him to be a master. So this kind of stuff can happen, and probably most likely happens, that long after you're gone, something emerges as a masterwork, and maybe in your entire lifetime you never knew. So it's not to say either that a work must even aspire to be a masterwork. There's time-based works. There's works that go away after time, and they can have a lot of impact for the time that they're around. Now, in digital art, I'm a digital artist. Works that don't seem to last for very long, for one reason or another, I call them digital ice sculptures, in that they melt, right? They go away. And they can have a lot of power and impact. But for some reason or another, it could be the machinery, it could be the popularity, it could even be the aesthetic. They tend to go away. So some of the reasons that digital art, which is what I'm speaking of, some of the reasons where they might tend to go away, and I'll name some of the obvious ones and maybe some of the ones that are not so obvious, but let's look at some of these. Obsolescence, for example. Net art and browser art, internet art. They change the browser. It breaks the art. There's a lot of very well-known works of internet art that don't work anymore because of browser technology. Some of them also made use of, in fact a lot of them made use of the internet itself as a connective medium. And so as long as things are connecting the way it does today, the artwork functions and works, and it's really interesting, and stuff happens. And so they change the communication protocols between all the servers. The artwork breaks. It doesn't work anymore. So here's another one, CG graphics, right? Computer-generated graphics, pixelation, jaggies. So the stuff that maybe looks good right now, we're like, wow, this is amazing what we made with the machine assistants, eventually starts to look obsolete as the machines get better and starts to look more photorealistic. We don't like it so much anymore. Oh, that looks not as advanced. It looks crummy. We get a customization, right? We get a customize to seeing things a certain way. Jaded audiences, we always want more. We've seen it all. We see pictures on the internet of art now. You don't have to just go to a museum or a gallery and get yourself somewhere. You can see thousands and thousands of pieces of work as a JPEG. Now obviously, for most work it doesn't do it justice. But you become jaded to all of these different images. And so you want something to have a high entertainment value or a high, maybe a shock factor. Something that's going to move you in a really big way right now. Or else your attention's going to get lost. We're going to go somewhere else. We'll go to the next thing. Another one is upgrades, hardware improvements. Again, can break the work. Maybe you've got something that functions on a particular machine, and it has the computer to run it. And eventually you can't get that machine because it's been upgraded, and maybe the hardware is different entirely. Another issue that I'm wrestling with quite a bit, and have been for many years, and I think there's a lot of digital artists who would just tell me I'm wrong about this, but I think this is a huge issue, and that's sterility. I think digital art is always having to fight against sterility in that we are organic beings, and we don't want things to be too perfect or too symmetrical because we're not affected by it. We don't get a visceral feeling by things that are absolutely dead perfect. It doesn't, at least for me, you might argue this with me and we can talk about this. I think that when you have something that's too perfect, too symmetrical, when you have machine motion, and I mean machine motion where things look weightless, where things look mechanical as they move. Let's say animation, where let's say the movement of an arm or a leg has the perfect speed, and doesn't show weight, I think is also an issue. I don't think we relate to it as much. Where people, we want to see the traces of people. And instead, to see the traces of machinery operating, it's like watching a clock tick, or the mechanics of an old clockwork. It's hard to get an emotional impact out of that. It may look fascinating to see this movement for a while, but I don't think we're going to relate to it on an emotional level. It often requires machinery to operate. A painting, a drawing, a sculpture, you put it out there and there it is. All you need to do is put some light on it so you can see it. And that's it. On the other hand, digital art often requires, if not always, unless it's like a print, it's going to require some sort of a mechanism, a machine, and so it's limited to that machine. The apparatus, the machine itself, becomes the medium, right? Determines the framework of the piece. It's going to be very much related to a piece of hardware. And so it becomes a determining factor. And I think that's an issue. And then there's this issue of digital art, because it is machine assisted or machine rendered, it's going to have an inferior resolution to a physical object. And the image on this screen has a inferior resolution to this wall with nothing on it, because I can get closer and closer and closer to this thing, even under a microscope, even under an electron microscope, and continue to get more and more and more information out of it. Whereas a screen image, it's much less of a resolution. Other problems, duplication. A piece of digital work can be cloned perfectly. Artist aura. How does the artist emerge from a digital work? And what I mean by aura, for example, a painting, every stroke in the painting is like a signature, right? It's a gesture that's been caught. It's like a footprint, a trace of a living person that did that, right? I mean, if you ever stood in front of a famous painting and even kind of got off to the side to see the strokes and stuff, you really feel like, wow, it's almost like I'm standing next to the artist when he did this. I feel the artist because I'm seeing this remnant, this trace of the artist's life, because this captured those moments in his life or her life. And digital art, it's very hard to make that happen, to make that kind of artist aura emerge from a digital work. And the other is preservation. Museums are dealing with this right now quite a bit, even with stuff that was made in the last, say, 20 years. If machines are breaking and you can't get the parts anymore, if the software is no longer available, things like that, how do you preserve digital art? And it's tough. I mean, even the picture of the Mona Lisa eventually cracked up. So it's a damaged piece, really, in a lot of ways now. But nonetheless, has survived a long time. Digital is going to crack up a lot sooner, to the point where it may disintegrate completely, unless you have some way of preserving it. And it may be that, such as something like with video art, is that it's transferred from one medium to the next, to the next, to the next. And so maybe that preserves it. It's not exactly as it was originally, but there's enough going on that it's still considered an important piece of work. So next I want to show is some digital artists that I think have found some solutions to a lot of these issues. Maybe not all of them, but they have some interesting solutions to some of these things. That I find to be inspiring and want to maybe use some of these elements that they found. One is the video artist Namjoon Paik. So he was one of the first video artists, perhaps one of the first more famous video artists. And one thing I like that he does, is he makes these really, I think a lot of you are probably familiar with him, but those that aren't, he makes these really intricate, amazing videos that honestly look dated after a while. He's using a lot of video effects, and after a while you're like, oh yeah, he was using the video toaster. They don't make that anymore, but that's what it used to look like, and those were all the effects that was in there. So you start to kind of see that, and that's okay. So that becomes sort of a period-ish thing. But what's cool about it is if you were to pull the plug and not have the video at all, it's a sculpture. There's still something happening here. And I've even been to people's houses that have owned Namjoon Paiks, and for the most time they keep them turned off. And then when people come over, they plug them in and turn them on and say, well, here's the piece. But even turned off, they look pretty damn cool. A couple of other examples. So he's using the hardware and the software to make something. And I think really most of his work can look pretty damn cool turned off. And so even if it was the break, he still has something going on. He still has his sculpture. So another artist that I like is Tony Orsler. Is this a video? Yeah. Video to play. He kind of does performances, and then he projects onto objects. So you've got the object and the projection, and I suppose if you think about the longevity, if the projector broke, maybe you project it in another way with modern equipment. But nonetheless,
I know what you want to do. I know what you want to do. I know what you want to do. I know. It's written all over your face. You're not fooling anyone. I can read your mind.
so he kind of creates these sort of installations with both objects and video. And I think that's an interesting way of going about this, to make something that's going to use digital art, combine it with organic objects to a very visceral kind of effect. And it's also this performative thing that's happening. So you feel this woman who performed this piece at one point, right? She really did do this at one point. So again, you've got this trace going on. And she is confronting the viewer, in fact, accusing the viewer in a very intense way. So you respond to it as if somebody is really standing there and accusing you. Another is a very famous video artist, Bill Viola. He makes these big, these days anyway, he makes these really big video installations with screens, like maybe a room this size with 10 screens, 5 and 5 in a dark room, and these really big, amazing videos. He often uses high-speed video to then slow everything down, so you get this slow motion effect that creates imagery that looks different, as if we were different beings that could see something in a different way. And makes these really poignant, very powerful pieces. And so with just video projected on screens, which again could be transferred, he creates emotional response. So I like that. Corey Archangel, on the other hand, this is called Mario Clouds. And this is from a video installation. This is a still, really. He's taking, what he did is he took the Mario game and hacked into it. Literally, like solder gun, hacked into it, the chips and everything. This is all chips into the cart, and took out everything except for the land and the clouds. In fact, in the original, there's just the clouds, and you can use a joystick and all he sees the clouds moving by. And he said, "Hey, you know what? This is an aesthetic. This is a look. Compare this to Warhol with his silkscreen look, right? You got this brilliant color splash kind of stuff. And so he saw something in video games that people were ignoring because you're playing the game. And I liked that he was able to sort of pull this out and say, yeah, it's jagged, it's pixely, it's simplified, it's a look, it's an aesthetic. And so to me, this becomes timeless. It's not going to be said, oh, this is just this old look. It's obsolete now. We don't like this anymore. We have better stuff. We have stuff that's more photorealistic. Now the race car game looks really like a road and really like you're racing, and this is junk. No, instead, we've got a look, a particular aesthetic that he's pulled out. Okay. So the artistic concerns that I'm talking about, like I said, they've been kind of nagging at me over the years. And I've tried to, with my own work, and I'll show some of my own work now, to do things that I think might solve some of these issues. And it's not to say that's going to determine the only work I make and must solve all the issues, but that it's going on in my mind. And so it's going to help me judge where I go, determine where I go with my work. So I started doing these, this is like 2005, I was doing these video portraits. I wanted them to look out at you. She's been told when she was filmed to look into her reflection in the lens and think about self-love. Think about how much she loves herself. And the viewer standing in front then becomes the subject of her love. And so the image, the video image, the digital work is in love with you. And I wanted to get that emotion to come out. I tried it with a friend of mine, photographer. He was much more conflicted about facing the camera, which is ironic because he's a photographer. And so you see this sort of range of emotions happening as he really is almost up in arms with the camera in front of him, as if he's going to go over and maybe hit it at some point. Or then he starts to relax a little bit. He starts thinking, what's my problem? Then he kind of comes back to, so it just sort of, again, I've got this range of emotions that then gets put onto the viewer. I started breaking up faces into separate parts. Kind of creates maybe a visceral effect because we don't expect to see things in that way. Other works, I started getting into video sculpture. Let's see if I can get this one to go.
Hold on, hip hop percent, feeding back there. Hold on, hip hop percent, feeding back there. Hold on, hip hop percent, feeding back there.
The star was named the bomb. And if there are civilians close by you, who you gal folks, and the star was named the bomb. And if there are civilians close by
The early shows that professional coverage of America had more on its mission than its
from the Western Front to the American forces.
So it's actually about 40 minutes of stuff that happens in there. This is just about a 1 minute sample of it. So it's an antique to begin with. It's an antique coffee grinder with M16 bullets and a video screen embedded in it. So I wanted to make work where the video and the object talk to each other, enforced each other in an overall concept. This is talking about the media spectacle and the function of bullets, and one transforming to the other. So this has a life to it in that over time, the object is going to get worn, it's going to get handled, it's going to have a history, which I'm fascinated with, this idea. Will the video screen keep playing forever? Probably not. But even again, when this thing turns off, we'll have an object. Antique camera with an embedded screen. And it's talking about this mixing of the past, trying this person here, who's a digital model, very kind of a low resolution digital model, trying to mix with the past. And really the object itself is that same sort of thing. This is the aesthetic of the digital camera with your screen in the back, punched into an antique camera, not quite mixing. I started getting into, a little bit delayed, so come on, somewhat newer objects, not quite so antique. This has to do with surveillance and telepresence on separate screens. I think I've been kind of fascinated with little screens and what you can do with little screens. You have kind of this little moving image that you can put anywhere. I've thought about embedding images or embedding screens into a tree or the side of a car, or where you would not expect to see these moving images. This one here having to do with where you place your consciousness, where we think we place our consciousness, where we live inside of our bodies, where we feel that we live, and can it be moved? Can we decide to move it around? Can we move our consciousness 2 feet to the left, for example? And so I'm mixing kind of text and imagery and putting it in this glass head. So this piece is a little bit hard to show documentation of. It's using a screen, it's a 3D screen, one of those ones that you don't need glasses to see it in 3D. If you've ever seen some of these screens that are, I guess the 3DS, the Nintendo 3DS I think has a 3-dimensional screen. So you can just look straight at it and things will pop out without the glasses. So I embedded one of those into this book. And the book stands up like this. There's a metal armature that's hidden inside of the book. And the screen is, and the apparatus is hidden inside of the pages of the book. And so it stands like this on a pedestal with this imagery popping out at you. And of course, you know, the book is indicative of what's going on here. And it's really talking about how ebooks are going to change the nature of literature itself. Because once all literature gets on the screen, and I think we're heading there, whether we like it or not, you say, well, I love books, I'm never going to get an ebook. Well, eventually, when you can carry the entire Library of Congress with you on a little device, and the screen looks so much like paper that you're okay with it, it doesn't look like a computer screen any longer, I think we're all going to have ebooks. And it's not to say that books will go away, but cassette tapes hasn't gone away either. But we don't use them much. And I think that's kind of where we're heading. And so it's going to change how things are written, because now you can put video, now you can put sound, now you can put moving imagery, moving text, all of that stuff. So we're going to have different kinds of books, and we'll change the way we write. This piece is about this big. This is a real airplane window from a 707 that I put inside Canvas and then put video behind it. And I'm calling attention to, this is called Flying in 2008. In 2008, there was extreme long waits that particular year on the tarmac while you're waiting to get off the ground. People were waiting for hours. People were complaining. There were even some laws passed that can only make you wait so long now because it was such a problem. And I realized there's a choreographed dance that's going on outside. And it's the stuff that we try to ignore and try to read our magazines and our books, trying to just do your thing, we need to get off the ground. But I realized there's a lot going on if you were just to look at that. And so this is about an hour-long loop of the stuff going on outside your airplane. And it's literally outside. You can even take the shade and pull it down if you wanted, right there from the piece. And again, I'm talking about, as far as solving some of the issues of longevity. If this was off, you would have an airplane window embedded in this canvas. And there's something going on with that. And of course, the video can be transferred to different mediums over time. You can put different screens in over time and continue to take that video file and play it. So I think this will have some longevity. But I did start to have issue with the fact that screens are lit, they're lamps, they compete with computer screens and television screens. And I started working with e-ink screens because they emit no light at all. You can see these in the gallery if you happen to walk down there. They look like paper. They really do, because they don't emit any light. And they kind of have more of the aesthetic of paper. And I really like that. And I like this a lot more for making artwork on, because it really looks like a moving ink drawing. When you actually get to see them, you'll see that it really quite does look like a moving ink drawing. And the other cool thing about this medium is if you were to take away the electricity or break it, it would just become a still. It wouldn't just go blank. It would just be that forever, or wherever it happened to stop. So then you would have, a drawing, still drawing. And we're kind of seeing some of it. Sometimes it flashes in between frames. On the actual piece itself, it never does. It's actually always, it is a series of stills. Some other ones that I've done. Go. Here's another. Loading up. Leave this thing to still for the moment. I just want to start moving. A long load. I'm just going to go ahead and pass it because it looks like it's not even halfway loaded. For some reason, it's taking a long time to read, so I don't think we're going to see this thing move for a little while. I don't know why. Working with text and imagery. And I'm working with the perception of meaning from flashing words. If you look at these, you should be able to read it. You will form the phrases in your own head. And you know, one of the things that a book author does is they're able to get your sense of the author within their words, right? If you read a really good book, you can hear the voice of the author. You feel like you're hearing the voice of the author. And I've been considering that a solution to this problem as well. Trying to feel the artist in some way through the piece. And so I worked quite a bit with text. This guy is a designer, actually, by the way. It's very interesting the way he speaks. But perhaps, you know, it has to do with second guessing yourself, having the voice in your head going while you're speaking. Should I be saying that? People liking what I'm saying? Yeah, that kind of stuff. All right, so that's it. That's what I wanted to kind of present, some of these ideas, and so now I'd like to kind of just open it up to this conversation of really the question about, you know, digital art possibly having the same visceral qualities, the same reactive qualities that masterworks have had in the past, whether it's possible or how it might be accomplished, whether it's even important. Yes?
First of all, thank you for coming and raising some of these questions, because I think there are things that many of us grapple with. And I enjoyed your show very much. One of the things that I want to kind of talk about is that there's, in your work, there's a distinct, it's more than a nod to painting and drawing and photography. It's, you're basically embracing that history and integrating digital work with those kinds of forms.
Yeah.
And in the early waves of computer art, one of the critiques of computer art was that it was simply trying to mimic what painting and drawing have been, or what photography has been, and therefore wasn't carving out its own identity.
Yeah.
You don't seem to have a problem with that. You seem to embrace that sort of combination of across time. And so in a way you're dealing not only with the you're not only making a nod to the history of painting and drawing and photography, it's also something having to do with the visceral world. Additionally, you know, there's a lot of complexity here. I'm trying to get to my question, so everybody can just kind of bear with me. Like in the show there, your animations questions are, they also seem to make a nod to early computer art, as in Kenneth Knowlton and, you know, the guys who made the big mural of a nude, okay, figure, and it was made from computer symbols. So the symbols were translating the values of the nude. So there was, the layering goes to the extent that now we're dealing with the traditional subject matter and dealing with it in computer terms. So there are all these layers going on. So I guess it seems as though you're saying that the visceral is definitely a desirable thing compared to that in some ways light and energy are not visceral enough. That if the electricity goes off, we still have the form, so that's great. We can fall back on that. But I'm wondering if, like, if in your work, have you ever considered like just letting the algorithm go loose on your drawings, or do you know what I'm saying? Is it
Well, I mean, you can certainly write a mathematical algorithm and see what emerges from it. And I've seen a lot of digital work like that. Like that's has been a trend off and on since people started making anything with a computer that looked like art or imagery. And I have to say that I'm often fascinated for a moment as I watch the algorithm do its thing, and then I get bored kind of quick. Now you might say, well, what's your problem? Why are you getting bored? This is great stuff. So, I mean, it's not to say that my reaction is everybody's reaction. But that's what happens to me. And it's because, like I was talking about before, it's like watching a clock tick. You're seeing the machine operate. And it becomes very, very apparent that you're seeing a machine operate. And so I have problems relating to it. I'm not, I don't feel like I'm embracing another life. I feel like I'm hugging a refrigerator or a Coke machine. And that's my issue with it. It's not to say that it isn't valid artwork. I just wonder how long that may last, if that's going to be a problem. My reaction of it's sterile, I'm not getting the response that I have gotten from other works, if that's going to become a problem. Like, for example, there's so many paintings that people will come into a museum or a gallery, let's say a museum like the Louvre or something like that, and they come and visit the painting. And they come like every so many months, come visit their favorite painting. And they just stand there in front of it, and they don't get tired of it. They visit it like a friend, and they see more in it. Every time they're in front of it, perhaps it even gives them a feeling. Or maybe it's a landscape or something, and they will escape into the landscape and imagine themselves there. It becomes like a dream. They just stand there and just be in that dream for a while. You know? And I want to see digital work do that. That people come and visit it. You know, and never get tired of it. And I don't know if algorithmic work has that capacity. I may be proven wrong, maybe there's going to be some. But especially stuff that's like random, stuff that just takes, let's say, stuff from the internet or stuff from radio waves or television waves, and then puts it together in some algorithmic way, and you see it displayed or you hear the sound of it, and it just mixes it up, and you don't know what's going to emerge from that mix. You might get moments in that mix where you're like, wow, this all makes sense for a moment. And then it kind of goes away into randomness again. Again, I don't know if that's going to have that kind of longevity. I don't know if the final product, which is the mix itself, I mean, you could also just have a recording of yesterday's mix, and you wouldn't know the difference. I don't know if that final product is going to have the capacity.
I think there are some institutions like ZKM in Karlsruhe, Germany, that are doing, that are places where these kinds of questions can be addressed really well. Like a place like that that has a museum that is making an effort to actually archive digital media and digital art and new media art. but also within the same, it was an old munitions factory, but within the same building, there's a museum of painting and drawing and sculpture along with the Museum of New Media Art.
Yeah.
And people are invited to come in and really grapple with these questions, you know, which are not simple. And I mean, you do a wonderful job of bringing those worlds together. I mean, it's very poetic and very successful, you know. But I'm often, I mean, this is a personal thing I think I'm relating to here, is like I'm often grappling with the things that are not so physical, but yet are, light is a medium. It's
Absolutely, light is
Yeah.
a medium. In fact, if you don't turn on the lights, you don't get to see the art.
right, and energy can be physical, you know, but much more transient than you know, a chair. And so, you know, I think I just think as artists, there are huge questions to work with there, and we're in physical bodies, but we're also, those bodies are going to break down, and what happens then?
Well, we change over time.
Yeah.
That's what we do. I mean, and I think we're in a lot of ways, we want to look in the mirror. We want to see a reflection in some way. And I think that's what we relate to, is something that's reflective of people like us, you know, humanity in general, the human experience. I think that maybe one of the things that we look for in art is some sort of a reflection. And maybe the reflection of somebody else that we can relate to. Yes?
So I have sort of a different angle on Jan's question about this physical kind of resonance versus the more ephemeral works. I do feel like a lot, this question can have an underlying assumption of like a museum or being in contact with the work, and there's a physical presence, like being in a site. And you yourself do work in these other ways, like we talked about last night, your e-ghost on Match.com. You had mentioned the guy who was selling his blackness on eBay.
No.
You know, you just said that we look for a reflection of our experience. I think we all feel inundated with the digital world and all that. And so to me, it's exciting to see artists taking that medium on its own terms. You know, it's the internet, and it's infiltrating that company, or what you do with the Kindle books in a way. And then we're not worried about a lot of these questions that you're bringing up, with longevity, masterpiece. It's just, it is what it is, and it has, you know, this pointed, even bringing out our humanity in some of those questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think that we're trying to humanize it in some way. We're trying to put the ghost in the machine in some way, right? Because if you can succeed in having the ghost appear in the machine, you can relate to the ghost, and the machine will just be considered a framework and a structure, and we're going to be okay with it, right? But I think it's this essence that's going to bring us toward it and bring us to want to be with it over time, and possibly, it might become a masterwork at some point because the ghost is so strong, right? I mean, the ghost in the Mona Lisa is amazingly strong.
I myself can't relate to that question, that term of masterwork, I guess.
Well, the reason why I'm framing it in the idea of the masterwork is something that withstands the test of time. And so it doesn't become obsolete. It doesn't become something we no longer talk about, something that just disappears into oblivion. And I'm not necessarily saying all art must succeed that way, because you can have amazing works that go away. But I'm curious if digital work can emerge that way, that in 100 years, we're still talking about a piece of digital art that was made around now, and what that might look like. So that's really what I'm kind of after, is that kind of thing. Because if something withstands that much time, and that many changes in culture, in humanity, in our concerns, then it really had something powerful going on, to keep around for that long. And so that kind of powerfulness is kind of what I'm curious about. Sorry, that was my powerful phone.
I don't see it anyhow different than any other medium in terms of that, just giving it time is really all it needs to go through filtration of randomness and also poignancy. Like, you showed Nam June Paik and that did it, right?
It did.
I mean, it's a major piece, and his piece of predicting kind of internet, the television with every single channel of the world, right? Like this kind of concepts. I mean, it wasn't just maybe the medium or the kind of physicality of it. It was sort of the greater sort of connotation of why the piece was made. I mean, to me, it's also about kind of languages, and it seems that applying, like Masterwork almost applies sort of one formal language and judging, sort of like using one culture standards to understand another culture, and it can create, it's sort of a conflicting issue of values where, like David or the sculpture of David or something, lots of it is about sort of the spectacularity of the trade, right, or like the quality of the sculpture.
The wow factor.
Yeah,
the wow
right.
factor. Like, hey, it really looks like a person and it's really big.
Exactly, and I think most of the, anything we think of as masterwork from that far back, it's usually rooted in something of such nature. I mean, that it's extremely of sort of high quality, and with history, and I mean, just the democratization and the post sort of modern approach, and I mean the stuff that can function as art and its application as such is so diverse. I mean, it can, people discuss meals and food and just about anything in that sort of similar language. So it seems like the time is just very different. That, some of the most amazing pieces are maybe just happenings. They're like these activities that happen one time for once, and you may or may not even have documentation of it.
Yeah, right. You may not have
it doesn't have to
documentation
exist sort of
right.
in a possessive, ongoing sense. I mean, I don't think there's a limit
Yeah.
to all the possibilities. But I mean, in a sense, like, I think that was one service done to digital, was that it was thought of as somehow separate from any other form for a long time. It was almost like an inherent prejudice or something. And I don't think like anything can really be sort of handled that way. In a way, like you're sort of setting yourself at not giving it a chance. In a way that I do think, I mean, to me, like, one thing about digital is that it's immaterial, that it can, if it wants to, like, it doesn't have to be rooted in a particular refrigerator or a window or something, right? The medium that it manifests itself through can vary. And it can be multiple places at the same time, and there are very sort of neat qualities to it that a piece of marble couldn't necessarily accomplish, a single piece of marble.
Yeah, and I don't want to put a value necessarily to say that masterworks are more valuable than, let's say, a happening. Something that's like a performance that might just be for the moment and then it's gone forever. You could say the performance is more valuable. So I don't want to necessarily compare values to say that, well, if it's not a masterwork, it's not worth talking about. It's simply a question that I have in my mind quite a bit. And I think when digital first kind of came out as this medium for art, when computers got good enough to make anything, people immediately got scared to think, well, is it going to replace everything? Because you can put images on it, there goes your paintings, there goes your photography. Is it going to replace all that? A lot of people were threatened by it, thinking that somehow their artwork was going to go away. And that has proven to be not the case at all. You're not going to say, we don't need the Mona Lisa anymore, we have the JPEG, let's toss the Mona Lisa. Right? Hasn't happened at all. So I think that finally that threat has kind of dissipated in a lot of ways. And certainly it has its own qualities. So transferability, like what you're talking about, is an interesting quality. And it may be that because of transferability, the length of time that a digital work might exist may eventually prove to be longer than organic works. Because organic works may disintegrate, never to be recovered or conserved. And the digital works will just transfer from one medium to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, and go throughout history. Maybe not in its exact original form, but maybe more of it will survive than the organic works. So it certainly does have that quality. You said maybe I'm not giving it a chance. Well, I can't give it a chance because I'd have to wait 100 years to give it a chance. Say, okay, give it a chance, let's see what happened. 100 years from now, I can't do that, right? Unless they live a really long time, in which case I'll let you know. But so in some ways I have to look at it through the perspective of the moment. And think, well, what might I think would do that? What's, you know, it's almost way I become, in some ways I become a predictor of the future, right? Or at least I try to in my own mind. What do I think is going to last? And I'm looking for it. I mean, you might say, why? Why are you bothering? But it's something that I'm doing. I'm searching for it in either stuff that I make or stuff that I see other people make. I'm wondering, thinking, did this person hit something that people are going to want to talk about forever? And of course, there is no forever, because eventually everything disintegrates, right? Even the human race may not be here for all that much longer at this point, right? But so we don't know. We don't really know. But it's still a question I think is worth pursuing. And it is limited. You don't necessarily have to say that it is the only question of art one should be thinking about. It's simply one facet. I think
Thanks, Joe. You present very well. It is 1 o'clock. Maybe one more question and
Yeah.
It seems like there'd be an analogy between theater and film. And theater is different and survives and was here before film. So I don't know whether you thought about your
like Shakespeare,
work.
right? Shakespeare wrote.
Well, you go
Or
back to
somebody
the
wrote.
Greeks and the
What's that?
the Greeks and the incredible theater
Right.
they had was.
So the performance
Very
goes
important.
away, right? The performance goes
Oh, it
away.
comes, but it survives. Those.
Well, the playwright, the writings of the play, the text, survives.
Right.
And it gets reperformed and reinterpreted.
Right.
And in a way, it's like taking your video file and reinterpreting it and performing it again on some other device in the future. So I think there's something to that as well. It isn't the original, it's something else. And certainly a play is not the original, it's something else. When it gets reinterpreted, reperformed, it's something else. But enough survives that we're interested. We still perform Shakespeare probably right now in 100,000 places is Shakespeare is being performed somewhere. So somehow something happened there. And just the text was enough to motivate us to continue to reinterpret it and to continue to talk about it and analyze it and think about it.
Pat, you have a last question?
Well, I just want to, I guess it occurred to me that the artist constantly reinterpreted, maybe culturally, but what I see here from my experience of being an American or my age, and I respond to a work of art, is probably very different than people that were responding to the Michelangelo, David, or what's going to happen in the future, or that they saw it in Japan versus the West Indies or something. You know, I think the reinterpretation is constantly changing depending on who the person is interpreting it.
Yeah, and I think popularity is going to change. I mean, there are probably millions in China who have never had any awareness of the Mona Lisa or David, right? Just never saw it, never knew anything about it, but might have a whole different awareness of art. I mean, very, very educated in the art of that culture. So it's not to say that it's sort of this worldwide thing. But I wonder if you took somebody who had never seen David before and plopped them in front of it, the sculpture, if they wouldn't still respond in a very big way to it. I sort of think they would.
Maybe
Maybe
not.
I'm just imagining it they would.
But maybe not
I mean,
Mona Lisa. I mean, the size, the.
Well, I don't know, the Mona Lisa is something else. The Mona Lisa is kind of cracked up. And honestly, I think it might have been more interesting if, had it been, you know, preserved perfectly, and you can still see all the action happening around the eyes and everything. But I think like the first time I ever saw David, I didn't know that that's what I was in front of. Someone just said, "Oh yeah, there's that sculpture over there," and I wasn't really familiar with it at the time. And there I was standing in front of it, and I got to say, just even looking at the feet, it just had this motion happening, almost like I was going to see them just start walking away. I mean, there's just something to this thing. I don't know how to explain it. Boy, it just seemed like it was alive. And I sort of.
I've never seen it except in an image. So
Well, in an image, it just looks like another sculpture of a person. It doesn't look like anything. You can't get it. It's like a lot of artwork. Seeing the JPEG is nothing. It's like seeing a shadow. But of course, we're fooled into thinking that's it. That's all you can see. Oh, now I know what David looks like. You don't. Until you stand in front of this thing, you don't get it. When you do, you get something in a very, very big way. And certainly a lot of artwork is like that. Some artwork will hold up pretty well as a JPEG, but a lot of it won't. But I think that you know, certain things happen. Somehow life, there's the ghost in it. There's something going on. And maybe that's what I'm trying to find. How to maybe put my ghost into things. I'm looking for the ghosts of others.
Okay, thanks so much, Joe.